It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Yes, it does on a Monday, and good to have you with us. Thank you, Chad Erickson. Lots to do over the next 60 minutes. We need 2 hours today, but we only got 60 minutes. Bill Bender from the Sporting News will join us. We'll get into the Alabama SMU debate, college football playoff bracket. They got it right. We could celebrate for a change. We'll get into that. Also, Brian Kenny from MLB Network will stop by, talk about the Juan Soto deal. We will get into that as he goes to the Mets. That coming up in 10 minutes. Sam and I will talk about it. Then we'll hear from Brian Kenny coming up about 20 minutes from now. All right, Sam Yarnell. Week 14 in the NFL is just about a wrap. We will have a Monday Night Football game to talk about on tomorrow's show. But in the meantime, some of the big highlights. What did we learn? Lessons from Week 14 in the NFL. Look, obviously, if you're a Bills fan, you have to have some concern about the fact that your team gave up an avalanche of points in Los Angeles against the Rams. But let me say this. Even in a loss, somehow, some way, Josh Allen actually managed to improve his MVP resume with one of the great performances you're going to watch in a football game. This was a fun game, a real banger, one of the best of this NFL season. But boy, who had Week 14, a 6-6 Rams team coming in and hanging up 44 on the Bills?
Well, I think that there were, quite frankly, a lot of people who thought that this was the week for the Rams offense to get right. It's the first time all season. It's the first time all season that this team has had a completely healthy complement of weapons, and quite frankly, they looked like it. Listen, the Bills struggled in all three phases of this game. Just a weird game. The defense did not look great at all yesterday. I mean, obviously, you give up 44 points to anybody, let alone a 6-6 team that may be a division winner now. I mean, let's not treat it any differently than it is. This team is in prime position now to win the NFC West, and those of you who listen to the Sports Wrap religiously are very happy about that, like myself. Yesterday could not have gone any better for listeners of the Sports Wrap or those of you who tail along with the Prince. If you'll remember, we are sitting at the Rams at 20-1 to win that division, and with that win yesterday, they are now a game behind the Seattle Seahawks with, I think, another matchup between those two teams pending. This was tremendous. This was wonderful. Josh Allen is the best player in the NFL. What are we doing here? I thought the Saquon Barkley narrative was cute for a week. I think Josh Allen may have listened to the news a little bit this week and then came out and had 6 total touchdowns? I believe he's the first player he's the second player in NFL history to have 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 passing touchdowns and over 300 yards passing in the same game. The first to do it, Hall of Famer, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, Otto Graham, back in the 1950s. So yeah, you have to go back to the post-World War II era in America to find another quarterback that did this. Josh Allen is your runaway MVP this year.
Well, if Barkley goes over 2,000 yards, I think it'll be closer than you think. But I don't know. What I'm curious to know is how 2,000 yards, because like in baseball, when Judge had his 60-plus home run season, Ohtani would have won the MVP had it not been for Judge having that hitting that that milestone mark. I wonder what 2,000 yards is going to mean to voters. Now, again, keeping in mind it's 2,000 yards with one more game. And that obviously plays some factor in it. It might be runaway to you. I still don't know if it's runaway to others. It's runaway to me. I would vote for him to win it, but I don't necessarily know if it's runaway to everybody. Take that, put it aside for a second. Are we sleeping on the Minnesota Vikings? We have to start asking the question at this point. I've thought they were frauds all along. Somehow you win 9 games in a row or whatever it is here, and you got to start taking the Vikings seriously. Sam Darnold making enough plays, Justin Jefferson looking like Justin Jefferson. Granted, some of this is the fact that the Falcons are frauds, which we've known for quite some time now. You've seen Kirk Cousins over the last couple of weeks really struggle. Maybe we're sleeping on the Vikings, and we're gonna have a conversation later in the show, Sam, about a wild card team being able to win the Super Bowl this year. Minnesota certainly could be that argument at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sleeping on the Vikings, it's got to be just a lucid dream at this point. Their 2 losses this season have come by a combined 12 points. Like, this is never a team that was out of contention. They just happen to play in one of the historically best divisions in a season that we've seen in the history of this game. Sam Darnold is a dog. Like yesterday, he went out there against a bad Falcons defense and quite frankly, a bad Falcons team. So let's not completely overreact because the Falcons are not good. But Sam Darnold still went out and threw for what? 350 yards and 5 touchdowns? Like, that's nothing to shake a stick at in any realm. So yeah, the Vikings are very much still in contention, and especially after that 2-week lull where I think a lot of people were like, okay, reality caught up to them. They were actually frauds. They were internally like, no, this is not the team that we are, and they've turned it around. It has been truly impressive to see out of the Minnesota Vikings the renaissance of Sam Darnold. Listen, on the Atlanta side, though, Jason, I don't know what fixes this team, because it seemed like in the offseason they went out and did everything they needed to do to be a completely different team than Arthur Smith had put together last season. And this whole year, they've looked exactly the same. They have been a feeble team that has not been able to put their throat on the necks of their opponents when they need to. Or, I'm sorry, put their foot on the necks of opponents when they need to. I don't know. The Falcons are going to have to do something, I guess, much broader than they've already been trying.
Hold on, I'm trying to put my throat on the neck of this microphone.
Yeah, it was.
And see how that works out. Last but not least, there is concern in Philadelphia, and I thought you'd never say that about a team that's won as many games in a row as the Eagles have. But when you have A.J. Brown out there going after his quarterback, and they're supposed to be buddies, they're supposed to get along well. And, you know, there's concern about Jalen Hurts, and they beat the Panthers yesterday. And again, no bad wins in this league. I will continue to say that. But you have, Jalen Hurts seemingly unable to pull the trigger on making certain throws. That's obviously got A.J. Brown upset. And the Eagles are winning games, but there is obviously discontent in Philadelphia right now, real quick.
Yeah, 100% there should be. Saquon Barkley's numbers are getting worse. Like, if you take away his longest rush yesterday, I believe it was one of his lowest yards per carry totals of the season. The O-line didn't look good, and you were playing against a horrible team. We told you to take the Panthers in this game, and I really hope you listened, because my goodness, Carolina simply outplayed Philadelphia in that game. They just didn't have the talent when it mattered.
All right, we're coming back. Juan Soto to the Mets. My reaction may surprise you. Or maybe it won't if you watch the show. That's next. We roll along on this Monday edition of the show. Got some NFL in to start things off. Now we switch gears to a story we knew was coming at some point. We just didn't know we'd be talking about it today. And that is the decision from Juan Soto. He has decided to take his talents, well, right across the river. He's going to the Mets. 15 years, $765 million, which still is kind of a mind-blowing number. And I'm going to be honest, my reaction to this, Sam, and I got a lot to say on this, so I apologize in advance. For obvious reasons, for anybody who follows the show, knows I'm a Yankee fan. My reaction may not be what you necessarily think, though. If you are angry today that Juan Soto has decided to go play for the Mets, you are being selfish. Nobody did anything wrong here. Nobody did anything wrong in the now. The Mets didn't do anything wrong. We knew Steve Cohen was not going to be outbid. Okay? The Yankees didn't do anything wrong. They offered him $760 million. And the Yankees brand. Juan Soto didn't do anything wrong. Even if you want to say, the worst thing you could say about Juan Soto is he's a mercenary. That he just went to the team that was going to offer him the most money. I don't buy this Jeff Passan argument that, he saw a better future with the Mets than the Yankees. I don't buy any of that. Juan Soto went where the money was. And some of this is Scott Boras influence, and that's fine. But there's a very simple truth here. And I know people are going to say this is a Yankee fan and sour grapes. I'm not mad. The Yankees have a lot of money that they can go out and spend on a lot of different talent now that enhances this roster. So take that for what it is. Here is the reality of Juan Soto. He left the varsity to go play for the JV. How long have the Mets been in Major League Baseball? How many World Series have they won in that time? How many World Series have the Yankees won? How many division titles have the Yankees won? How many have the Mets won? How many pennants have the Yankees won? How many have the Mets won? Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, who's on it more, the Mets or the Yankees? You know the answer. And even with him going to the Mets, the Yankees will still be on Sunday Night Baseball more than the Mets will. I guarantee it. So, at the end of the day, Juan Soto is going to the Mets. The Mets have won the offseason, right? Right? That's what we're all going to say, Sam. The Mets have won the offseason. They won the offseason when they got Bobby Bonilla. They won the offseason when they got Francisco Lindor. They won the offseason when they got Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander. We've seen this has gone on and on and on. Great. The Mets got Juan Soto. Nothing's going to change. This franchise hasn't won anything since 1986. Talent, players, all of that stuff, it's great. You still got to surround them with other players. You still got to surround them with other guys. There's a team that was in the dumps halfway through the season and then miraculously turned it around. It was a great story. Juan Soto chose the JV. And it's the Mets. So they will still be the JV even with Juan Soto. It's still a Yankees town. Nothing has changed in that regard, Sam.
So I agree with you that he chose the JV. My thinking now is that both New York teams have become the JV, and I think that you'll see that play out this season. Juan Soto going to a team that even with his addition becomes maybe the second best in their division. And probably not still. I mean, quite frankly, even with Juan Soto, I would still probably put the Braves ahead of the Mets. I'm really sorry, New York sports fans. This is yet another letdown from your ever so beloved city. Steve Cohen just handcuffed, and I know people are going to debate with me on whether or not it's the right word. It is the right word. Whether or not it works out is a different question. Steve Cohen just handcuffed his franchise to $51 million a year, $0 deferred for the next 15 years. Now, I'm just saying there's a chance that goes incredibly wrong and we're looking at one of the worst contracts in baseball history. No evidence points to that being the case because Juan Soto has played like a Hall of Famer so far into his career. But that's not to say that this could just continue for the next 15 years. I point directly to Grady Sizemore, as I do so frequently on this show, as a perfect example of that not working out. So yes, it is a handcuff. It will severely limit the Mets' abilities over the course of the next 15 years because, quite frankly, Major League Baseball is not like the NBA, and one player does not make another player want to come to a team. You saw that with Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, and the Yankees. Here's the opening day lineup as projected by I believe many people around baseball. I got this one specifically from John Boy Media. For the New York Mets opening day lineup 2025, Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Mark Vientos, Brandon Nimmo, Starling Marte, Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor, who? Francisco Alvarez and Brett Beatty. I'm sorry, that's not a lineup that makes the playoffs. And I've seen it because I've rooted for teams that Juan Soto has been on and have not made the playoffs. That is not a team that makes the playoffs. Okay. By the way, their projected starting rotation this year, Senga, Clay Holmes, who? Frankie Montas, David Peterson, Paul Blackburn, Tyler McGill. This team is not built to make the playoffs right now, and they just went and got one shiny object to keep their owner happy.
Okay. There's a key word, though. There are two key words that you said there at the very end. Right now. The thinking is they're not done. The thinking is they're going to still go and spend more. And trust me, players around baseball take notice when an owner in the biggest market, in sports, goes out there and spends money the way that Steve Cohen just has and puts it into Juan Soto. I think other players around baseball are going to see that. other Scott Boras clients, whatever it may be. And potentially they do wind up signing with the Mets. So I think it is premature, as I think it's premature to go out and say both New York teams are JV. I think it's premature in that the Yankees are still going to go out and spend. They just showed they were willing to spend $760 on Soto. They're going to spread that around now. I don't know how many players they're going to spread it around to, but they're going to spread it around. I do think it is premature because now the rest of the free agent market moves. Now we're going to start to see where these other pieces fall because mostly everybody was waiting to see what would happen with Juan Soto before deciding where their guys are going to sign. Corbin Burns is out there. Max Fried is out there. Crochet could be out there. Teoscar Hernandez. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there, Sam. A lot of talent out there. So we'll see what happens. Brian Kenny's going to join us coming up in a couple of minutes. I will get some thoughts with him. I want to see what he thinks about the Soto deal and more next. All right, we talked some Juan Soto. Let's do a little more. You've heard what I have to say about it. Here's Brian Kenny. Does a great job on all things baseball with MLB Network. Knows a little bit about boxing, too. So what was your immediate reaction, and now that it's settled and sunk in a little bit to Juan Soto to the Mets for $765, could be as much as $800 million for 15 years?
Yeah, it's even if we expected it and we expected the Mets, it still hits you pretty hard. That's a big, big number. It's the outer limits of what you can do for one player. Usually these are deals that can work out on the front end, don't work out on the back end. And we've seen what type of player he is. But look, he's a marvelous player. He's an impact bat. My main takeaway is what was leading up to this is remember while we're still close to the World Series, who he really is, which is he's the state-of-the-art at bat, right? He's the best at bat in the game, Jason. He's also a guy who will give away bases defensively and on the base paths when he's base running. And that's now when he's 25 years old. So he's great. It's not he's a great but. He's a great and, right? He's not Mookie Betts. He's not this great all-around player, even when he's young. He's Manny Ramirez, except that Ramirez was 5 years older when he hit the market and went to the Red Sox. So in that way, it's good. So it's kind of the good and the bad of Manny Ramirez. Remember it as being, wow, that was great. And he's a superstar. There's also the other side where he's not a great all-around baseball player.
Does he even make the Mets better than the Yankees right now?
Who knows? I mean, they're going to be different by the time the season starts.
Sure.
They've started shaping it. The Mets need a lot of innings, as we know. Like David Stearns did a terrific job last year in putting together the rotation. And without Severino, without Quintana coming back, they're just not even in close. They can't compete. They need those innings. So we don't know yet. The Yankees certainly have to do a lot more. Now they have to try to replace that offense. But we saw the Yankees, this is an opportunity for them to get more baseball-y, as we call it on MLB now. Why did they lose the World Series? They weren't as good of a baseball team on the field as the Dodgers. Doesn't mean they weren't very good. They could have won that series. They almost did. Then they started giving away outs and bases left and right. So this is a chance for them to get more baseball-y and turn in a different direction.
I know this is a what-if-y sort of question I'm going to give you, but if the Yankees win game one of that series, if Freddie Freeman doesn't hit that home run and the Yankees win the World Series, is Soto a Yankee or do we still get the same outcome?
I think it's about the same because, again, usually when you win, you're less apt to throw money at something to try to fix a problem. When you lose, you're a little more aggressive. So I think they see they wanted to be more aggressive. Look, Soto was a great Yankee for that 1 year. There's no question. He's going to be a great Met for the next 4 or 5 years. Age 26 through 29. There's very little doubt. Again, I want to emphasize as I'm giving the other side of things. He's a great at bat, and he's a great at bat in the playoffs, Jason. You know what I mean? Because if it's a walk that he can get, he'll take the walk. If it's a single, he just in the situation where you have second and third, and all you need is a single, he'll deliver a single. If you leave a ball up, he'll hit a bomb. He'll take his base if need be. He's like, we've seen even like Betts and Aaron Judge in the playoffs, their at bats sometimes are mercurial. Soto is not that guy. He is the absolute best at bat in tournament baseball. That's important. I just want to also point out, hey, there's that other side. He's Manny Ramirez with all that encapsulates.
If you're the Yankees, do you go and spread that $760 million across a lot of players, or do you just try to get a couple that impact you most? Do you go Corbin Burns, Max Fried, Teoscar Hernandez? Where do you think the Yankees' need is the greatest?
Well, first of all, this free agent class doesn't give you all the answers. So True. It's not hitting the market. It's not, don't look to spend $765 million. Look to spend it where you think you'll get better as a baseball team. Now, that could mean Max Fried or Corbin Burns. I'm a little leery of Burns with his strikeout rate. Fried, by the way, is very good, but he's also not always delivering, the innings. There's a lot of big starts he can't come up and make a great start. We've seen that. But you might look at, hey, Christian Walker is a great defender. Ha-Seong Kim is a great defender. You might want to go that route. You're not fixing it in one shot, but that's the idea. Look, the Yankees got as far as they did. Why? They had the deepest rotation. They didn't even use Marcus Stroman. Nobody else had a fourth starter. They had Marcus Stroman on the roster and on the bench, never used him. But they had this excellent bullpen that wasn't like superstar laden. Brian Cashman was able to piece that together. That's what you have to do. You have to work. You win as a team. Now, it might mean getting those extra innings and having this super deep rotation where you're just very good all year long. But I don't look to it, hey, go spend that money elsewhere. No, if the opportunity is there and Christian Walker makes sense, he's already 34, he's older. But if not, don't go looking to just spend that money.
If the time isn't now for Jason Dominguez, when is it?
Oh yeah, no, it's now. It's starting now. I mean, he's still very young. Is it age 22 season or about where he is? So no, it's time to get him out there. And look, that's part of not locking yourself up to the free agent aircraft carrier where you have that position, just locked in. And you lose, it's never the money. I pointed this out in my book, and that was 8 years ago, Jason, and Ahead of the Curve. It's not the money that sinks you. It's the opportunity cost. So think of, if it's whether it's Albert Pujols or Prince Fielder, you have a guy occupying that spot. You've invested too much. There's no moving him, and it blocks players from coming up.
Before I let you go, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you your reaction to Dick Allen, Dave Parker getting into the Hall of Fame.
Dick Allen, that's long overdue. Again, it's a shame that he gets in after he passes away. He was on that ballot with, while he was alive. So was Minnie Minoso in the same ballot. That was that same golden era. And I remember when the Veterans Committee at the time came up short. So look, this is great news, but he's getting in too late. For Dave Parker, it's not too late. He's one of these peak Hall of Famers, Jason, right along the lines of like. I always point out, no one ever said, hey, well, you need 10 years of greatness. No, there's very few guys like that. I like 5-6 years, 4 to 5 great years. And then if the rest of the career isn't great, how great was the guy at his peak? Dave Parker was one of those guys. So was Dale Murphy. So was Don Mattingly. I like peak Hall of Famers like that.
Yeah,
Johan Santana, by the way, is a peak Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Don Mattingly is the guy that I was going to bring up. Brian Kenny, MLB Now, MLB Network. Always appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Jason, take care.
All right, let's talk some college football. It's Monday on SportsWrap, and that means Bill Bender hangs out with us from the Sporting News. I watched a lot of college football on Saturday, and boy, did we get some thrilling finishes and some thrilling outcomes. SMU Clemson was a barn burner, Bill Bender. And then the decision came down on Sunday for SMU to make the college football playoff as opposed to Alabama. And look, for a change, I could say it. The committee got it right. For once, it feels like it's like Shangri-La. They finally got it right. What was your reaction to the fact that they actually pulled the trigger on SMU as opposed to Alabama?
Well, it felt like the debate was unfolding in real time. When the score was 31-14, it looked like there was an excuse to put Alabama into the college football playoff. But as SMU was making that rally, and for those that don't think conference championship games matter, I thought, okay, they're going to take SMU. You and I were texting back and forth a little bit, and it just feels like the right decision, and they didn't open themselves up for a bad precedent where we're just going to put in who we want regardless of wins and losses. I understand the Alabama side of this argument. I do. But I think that Oklahoma loss still sticks with me when they lost 24-3 at Norman.
Can I ask you one thing real quick? And I know Sam's going to jump in here as well. I think all of these things are cumulative, year to year, how these decisions in these rooms play out. If SMU goes in and gets waxed by Penn State, and then the Alabama people are going to come in, the vultures are going to descend and say, see, it should have been Alabama in this game, and fairly so. Will that change how this committee operates? It shouldn't, but will it change how this committee operates when it has a similar decision like this to make next year or in years to come?
It'll be in the back of their mind, no doubt, because people at South Carolina and Ole Miss and Alabama are going to be hate watching that game. There's no doubt. And they're going to want Penn State to put the hammer down and say, yeah, like you said, look, we should have been there. We could have gave Penn State a better game in Happy Valley. But, this is part of it. And I think I was struck by how happy Dabo was that SMU got it in. And I think it was genuine because he understands that it's not just about Clemson, it's about the entire conference and having that say in this college football playoff format. I think the same is true, Jason, about Boise State. People are going to see that they have this bye week, and let's say Penn State mows down SMU, goes into Boise. If Penn State wins that game convincingly, we're going to wonder, okay, why didn't Notre Dame have a first-round bye? Well, we know that one. Why didn't Penn State have a first-round bye? Why didn't Texas have a first-round bye? Why aren't these teams seeded appropriately?
Bill, we've talked so much throughout this college football season about the roles of athletic directors. It just feels like there's been a lot of controversy in that world this year specifically. The whole Greg Byrne thing after the playoff ranking comes out and he goes on this Twitter tirade crashing out about how they're not going to schedule playing against smaller teams anymore, which he thinks is bad for college football when his team lost to two conference foes who were sub 500. What is your kind of reaction to the AD stepping in and saying, we're going to change the way we play football because of the way that this committee, or the way we schedule our football season, because of the way this committee is showing us how they choose teams?
I understand, like I said, I understand the argument, but he's using the wrong argument. Their non-conference schedule, they took care of business. They did go to Wisconsin and win. They did go to South Carolina. Where they didn't take care of business is Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. And, how are you going to schedule your conference, I guess, would be the argument. I do subscribe to the theory that Alabama had a better strength of schedule and a better strength of victory than SMU. But in this format, SMU won all their conference games, didn't have a blip outside of a two-point loss to BYU, and it makes it hard to turn them away. So like I said, I understand both sides. I think Alabama's picking the wrong argument, though. I would keep pumping in, hey, we play in the SEC. Look at how many good teams we have. It's tough to win on the road. And, we're going to have to reevaluate how we schedule within our own conference more than anything. Maybe go back to divisions.
Was there anything else, Bill, outside of Alabama and SMU in terms of the way the bracket shook out that kind of took you by surprise?
Not really. I think the 5 through 8 seeding was the tough part for me. As I was breaking that down.
Penn State's got an easy path. I mean, all things considered.
Correct. And who was going to get that so-called easy path, right? They put Penn State ahead of Ohio State. I was going back and forth on that. I guess what the committee valued was that Penn State and Texas played an extra game and lost. I had no problem with Texas at 5. They lost an overtime game. It kind of felt like they were going to put them there anyway. I was intrigued by Penn State over Ohio State because Ohio State played Oregon closer and beat Penn State head-to-head on the road. But I think part of their decision, whether they would admit it or not, is they didn't want to see Ohio State and Indiana again in a rematch that we just watched on November 23rd. Indiana Notre Dame's pretty compelling.
Yes, it is.
Ohio State Tennessee is very compelling to me, having Tennessee come up here with a team that is very similar to Michigan with the defense and running game. And then you get Penn State SMU. So I'm happy with the field. I think it looks pretty good.
Bill, one of the trending topics that I saw over the weekend with the Carson Beck injury was comparisons between Georgia and how the committee treated Florida State with the injury to their quarterback last season. Any surprise in how they rated Georgia or how they treated the Beck injury?
We only got about 20 seconds, Bill, real quick.
No, I think they deserve the number 2 seed. It's different because Stockton came in, and Georgia, the bigger factor for me is that they're running the ball a little bit better with Trevor Etienne. I'm okay with Georgia at 2, no problem with it. They did have a very strong strength of schedule argument.
Bill Bender, always appreciate it, my friend. Check him out at the Sporting News. All things college football, all things football. Thank you, my friend. We'll talk to you next week.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.
All right, coming up in 10 minutes, Odds and Ends wraps up the show. Don't sleep on college basketball this early in the season. I'll explain why. Coming up in something, or I should say in Odds and Ends. Then we'll get into some NFL picks for the Monday night game. That extravaganza in Dallas tonight between the Bengals and the Cowboys. Could a wild card team win the Super Bowl? I think it's something you have to consider when you look at the strength of the teams we're talking about as potential wild cards right now. Yeah, the Steelers lead the AFC North, but would anybody sleep on the Baltimore Ravens right now as a potential wild card team that could win the Super Bowl? You look at Baltimore and how they've played this season, and while at times they have been perplexing because it feels like they should be much better than 8-5, they should have one of the best offenses in all of the NFL. Baltimore is a team that's going to have to be reckoned with when we talk about a potential wild card team winning the Super Bowl. And it looks like right now they are certainly going to be a wild card team as Baltimore trails the Steelers by a couple of games in that AFC North. Look in the NFC. Minnesota's 11-2. I mean, so you've got, and we talked about them at the top of the show in the opening segment, as a team that certainly can contend for a Super Bowl. And look, up until this past week, I had sort of labeled them as fraudulent. But it's hard to turn your head away from a team that's won 6 games in a row. You look at the two teams at the top of the NFC North right now. The Lions have won 11 in a row. The Vikings have won 6 in a row. And Minnesota's defense has certainly, proven itself. And again, when we talked about this team being fraudulent a couple of years ago, one of the arguments we made was just how bad their defense was. And we saw the Giants go in a wild card game and torch them. That's not going to happen with this Minnesota Vikings team, giving up just 240 points through 13 games this year. The Green Bay Packers are going to be a wild card team. Did anybody watch what they just did in Detroit? Yes, they lost against the Lions. But are you going to sleep on Green Bay right now as a team that's also going to be in the conversation if we're talking about a wild card team that has a chance to win? And here's the thing. In a NFL season where there is so much parity, and even with Kansas City at 12-1, and we didn't even get to them today in the opening segment, which just goes to show you how much there is to talk about in the NFL. But even with them at 12-1 and Detroit at 12-1, nobody feels inevitable. So if there is a year where you could have a wild card team, I don't even want to say sneak up, because if Minnesota were to, wouldn't be sneaking up. They're an 11-2 team. And frankly, they might still be able to make a case for being a division winner by the time the season ends. Look at what the Lions' schedule is. And I don't have it in front of me, but go ahead and look at the Lions' schedule here. the remainder of the regular season, I even did pull it up here just on the fly. They got the Bills, at the Bears, which will not be a gimme, at the Niners, who are going to be playing for something, and then at the Vikings, who they beat by 2 points in Minnesota earlier this year. There's a chance that we're talking about Detroit as one of the wild card teams here over the final, couple of weeks of this season. We could be talking about, Minnesota is the division winner there. Seattle has been very interesting this year in terms of, in that little bit of a rebuild. I don't want to say rebuild. A retooling of that franchise, moving on from Pete Carroll. They're going to potentially win that NFC West. Frankly, every team in that division is still alive to make the playoffs. I don't think anybody's inevitable is my bottom line, I think, when we talk about could a wild card team potentially win the Super Bowl. I think it is so up for grabs this postseason. I think there's a lot of great values out there from a betting standpoint when you start talking about who wins the Super Bowl. The Lions are the favorite right now at plus 270, the Chiefs at 500, then the Eagles at 550, even with all the disarray there that you heard in the postgame after a win yesterday. Buffalo at 650, the Ravens at 1,000. There's some value. You start getting down the line and deep into this thing. There's a lot of teams that are potentially going to make the postseason there are huge numbers for right now to win a Super Bowl. All you got to do is get hot at the right time. We talked about the Rams at the top of the show. The Rams are healthy right now. When that team is healthy, they are dangerous. It's not about, what your record is. It's how you're playing when the postseason starts. The Rams could be one of those teams that sneaks up and surprises a lot of people. They're going to have to win the division, and that's still a tall order considering, where they've been throughout the season. But watch the Rams. The Rams right now, you can get the Rams at 55-1 to win the Super Bowl. If they make the postseason, you're going to bet against Sean McVay and Matt Stafford not potentially winning a game or two? A lot of good conversations to be had about teams that could win the Super Bowl, and it certainly could be a wild card team. All right, we're going to come back, wrap things up. Odds and ends finishes things off. Some college basketball and a Monday Night Football preview as Sports Wrap continues. All right, just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Monday. Tomorrow on the show, more fallout from the Juan Soto Mets signing. And who knows now, like I said, other dominoes are going to fall as this MLB postseason now will kick into a higher gear in terms of, or I should say the MLB offseason and signings and where other players land. You're going to hear a lot of conversation on that in the coming days. We will obviously have it covered for you. Full Monday Night Football reaction as well. If you have not subscribed, Sports Wrap with Jason Page podcast, go and do it. It's available on all your favorite podcasting platforms, Spotify, YouTube Podcast, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Odyssey. We're on all of them. Amazon, you name it, we are on all of them. Sports Wrap with Jason Page Substack for all your extra sports wrap that you can possibly want. Extended interviews, conversations, clips from the show, Sam Yarnell insider betting picks, you name it, we got all of that and more. All right, without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends. Don't sleep on early season college basketball. Like, we haven't started getting into the meat of it yet, but some of these early season, they're almost like exhibitions because they're fun to watch At the end of the year, when we get into seeding for the brackets and all that, you'll hear about some of these games later on then. But, man, I watched a couple of fun ones. The battle in Seattle this weekend, Gonzaga and Kentucky. First time in like 7,000 years that Gonzaga has led a game by double digits at halftime and did not win. Kentucky got the win in that case. Also, UConn, Huskies, looking for their third straight national championship. A good win on the road in Texas, battling back after the troubles in Maui. And I thought it was really interesting, Sam. I was watching the game. I think it was Jay Billis talking about it, saying how Dan Hurley consults and goes and looks for advice and talks with like Gino Auriemma and Billy Donovan. The Gino note was interesting to me because for many years, there was this sort of wall. UConn and the men and women both had success. But Gino and Jim Calhoun, there was always sort of this icy relationship, this rivalry that was sort of taking place within the Huskies program. And I think it's fascinating that Dan Hurley is willing to go and talk with Gino Auriemma. And that's out there. That's information that's actually out there. I think it says a lot about Dan Hurley for all the different things you might want to say about Dan Hurley, who's never met a camera he didn't like, except this one, apparently. To me, it says a lot about Dan Hurley that he's willing to do that.
Yeah, I think college basketball this early in the season, to your point, Jason, I think the exhibition thing is kind of interesting, right? Because especially in a day and age like we were talking about with Bill Bender earlier of a 12-team college football playoff, having a 64-team playoff makes it feel like the regular season is just exhibition. It's an interesting point. Yeah, so with the UConn thing, Dan Hurley's a great coach, and like we know that he's obviously been looked at for NBA jobs. He's probably taken a page out of the NBA book there, which is, talk to your counterparts. And, it's the crossing of lines we see between sports. Like that's something that's very common in college football is calling another coach to see what potentially a team that they had already played that you're about to play is going to throw at you. So yeah, the parallels throughout sports continue to exist, and it's good to see that when you have these high profile coaches, they're taking advantage of every outlet possible to make their historically good team even better.
Monday Night Football, Sam Yarnell. I'd like to get excited about this game, but it's not going to be easy. Bengals -5.5 on the road in Dallas to take on the Cowboys. The total is 49.5. What do you got?
I would lean Bengals and I would lean over here. I look to the specials in these kinds of games where it feels like there are going to be a lot of points. Jamar Chase, 2 receptions in each quarter at 13-1. I'd like to take a shot at Jamar Chase, 20+ receiving yards in each quarter at 21-1. I would like to take a shot at as well. I think you could get some production out of CeeDee Lamb. There are some specials available on the FanDuel Sportsbook that you can combine some of the CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase stuff. I think that we get a lot of passing in this game, a lot of passing yards, just because these are two secondaries that generally tend to struggle. One way that I would probably look more solidly, Bengals team total over 27.5 at -104. That feels like a good look against a Dallas defense that continues to struggle. But, at the end of the day, I just keep it simple. Lean over, lean Bengals, over 49.5, Bengals -5.5.
Yeah, I tend to feel the same way, -5.5. The total is a little... I'm not sure
Where do these teams play defense, Jason?
I know.
Neither of these teams know how to play defense this year.
I know. I just see too many times in these primetime. I see too many instances where it feels like it should be over that number, and then we're 10-7 at the half.
Yep.
And we're just scrambling for points. By the way, congratulations to the Kentucky bettor who laid $3.1 million in the dumbest wager ever. Bad betting rewarded. He did wind up making over $440,000 with the win for the Eagles yesterday that he had to have been sweating out.
Yeah, and you can only assume that he lost half of his winnings in Tums consumption during that game, because there's no way that guy didn't need his stomach pumped from the anxiety.
I have a column coming out on MSNBC. Look for it if it's not already there in their opinions section about irresponsible sports betting and how this is just the latest example. That's going to do it for us. Thank you, Brian Kenny. Thank you, Bill Bender. We'll see you back here tomorrow.